faith releases the grace of God into a person's life to be saved. The only other way that you can get around that is through predestination, that God only gives grace to a select few. And that is a theology that is very prominent. But the Word of God doesn't, my conviction does not say that. And Romans chapter 4, verse 17, reveals one of the ways that grace is released into our lives. And what does it say? Somebody read it, please.
As it is written, a father of many nations have I made you.
No, did I say 4:17? I am so sorry. 5:17. That one's good, though. It goes with it.
For by the transgression of the one, death reigned through the one. Much more, those who receive the abundance of grace and of the gifts of righteousness will reign in life through the one, Jesus Christ.
Okay, receive the abundance of grace. Okay, that's active. In other words, we participate in receiving this grace. Because we've talked about before, we can cut ourselves off from this grace. We can fall short of it. And we'll look at another way where we can not receive grace that's purpose. And grace, remember, takes us to a level we can't attain on our own. So one way grace is released into our lives is receiving. Well, Hebrews 4:16 says what? Notice this one. Let's draw near with confidence to the throne of grace that we might receive what? Mercy. Find grace. And so what we've been talking about is this thing about finding grace. There are these, I want to call it this, it's almost like a video game, that there are these hot spots in life that we can come into, and there is grace for us. And the goal is that we find these spouts of grace. Okay, so one of the things that we were talking about there's a thing that's really in between these two, receiving and finding. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6. And hold your, if you're, it's too late. Oh, Sean, man. Okay, 5. Let's start 5:5. And what we're after here is the release of grace, participation of grace in our lives. So watch this. So 5:5. Oh no, okay. Read it, Alex, will you please? And 6, 5:5 and 5:6. Sorry.
Likewise, you younger people, submit yourself to your elders. Yes, all of you, be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time.
Okay, so what we're dealing with is God gives grace to the humble. And so God gives grace to the humble. Well, the interesting thing is, what does it say in verse 6 is, the humility is what? God humble us? No, what does it say?
Humble ourselves.
Humble yourselves. So there's a place, a thing that where we enter into humbling ourselves, and in that place of humbling ourselves, there is a flow of grace. So that's where we were at last week. Now, anytime we humble literally means to make low. And so you think about this, is that grace takes us to levels that we can attain on our own. Well, this we were talking about. God gives grace to the humble. And then it goes on to says, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, that he may, okay? Another word that can be replaced for grace is exalt. And that's the purpose of humility, to exalt us. And that's what we were talking about last week, remember? And we were talking about the different ways that humility gets expressed into our lives. Let me just read these out real quick. When we talk about exaltation, what does it mean? It means to empower us to enter our promised land, the very destinies we have. God putting us in leadership, respect and favor of others, places of honor, being justified before God, and coming into times of blessing is considered as a point of exaltation. So it's literally coming in this place right here is to be exalted. It is the result of humility. God gives grace to the humble, or so that he may exalt you. And so maybe think of it this way: exaltation is the finished work of the expression of grace.
But once you get exalted, isn't it a really fine line to not fall into, oh, look at me?
Now that's
Because then you're like,
That's a trap of
you're like Lucifer on the mountain.
But then you have humility.
Right? Because then you're trying to steal the praise from God. You're no better than Lucifer at that point.
yeah.
That's freaky.
Then you can get easily humbled.
Real quick.
Yep.
So,
And we'll talk about humility later, but right now we're talking about exaltation, and that's where I was. So, do what?
You can still be exalted.
Oh yeah, big time, big time. I mean, one of my all-time favorite stories of exaltation. One of my all-time favorite coaches, in no matter what sport, is a guy named John Wooden. John Wooden was the all-time greatest college basketball coach. I think he won, was it 11 national, either, yeah, he was the basketball coach at UCLA. It was either 10 national championships or 11 national championships. I mean, in a short period of time. How many was it? I think Mason, Googling it. 10?
10 in 12 years.
Yeah, 10 national championships.
The boy never watched film.
10 national championships. And here's the crazy thing. There's two stories about him. I went and did a basketball camp one time in Campbell College, South Carolina. And I was 15 years old. My brother was in the Air Force, was stationed right near where Campbell College is. And so anyway, I come up and stay with him, and I go to this basketball camp. And this basketball camp was a really big deal, and they had Pete Maravich, had a bunch of professional players. Press Maravich was there and all this stuff. And so I'll never forget this, you get all kind of different days. One day's, shooting, dribbling, ball handling, defense, and stuff like that. Well, one particular day, it was all about defense. And so anyway, there's this coach there heading up the defense, just a humble guy. Well, anyway, I get home. I get to Bud's house. Bud picks me up after camp. He says, yeah, Rick, tell me who was there. And I'm telling him, Pete Maravich, Press Maravich, and these other professional players. And Bud goes, well, and I said, Bud, there was this guy that was teaching us defense, and his name was John Wooden. And he goes, John Wooden? He said, don't you know who John Wooden is? And I go, well, yeah, no, I guess he coached at UCLA. He's just the greatest coach ever. And you would have never known it. Here he is with a bunch of teenage kids, high school kids, just being down to earth, not so much humble that I didn't even pick up on he was anything. And there was another story about him. This is sort of what Nell's talking about. Can you be exalted and be humble? John Wooden goes to a coach's clinic, and there's this guy teaching up front. He's teaching on basketball strategy and stuff like that. He looks up, and sitting in the back of the room, at the back table, is John Wooden. And John Wooden's there sitting there with a notepad, taking notes. And this guy's he's teaching this coach's clinic, and he's thinking, what is he taking notes about? You know, because I know he knows a whole lot. He's forgotten a whole lot more than I know. And he's sitting back there, not up front, being a big dog. He's sitting in the back and he's humbling himself and he's taking notes. He's not sitting back there, well, I know everything. You know, and that attitude is sort of what you were saying, Nell, is that can somebody be exalted and still be humble? Yeah. You can't get any better than winning 10 national championships in 12 years. I mean, huh? No, it's Goldsboro. Seymour Johnson, which was not right next to Campbell College, but near it. But anyway, so literally so think about exaltation is the finished work of grace. God gives grace, and when the fulfillment of grace affects, that's exaltation. And that is the end result of humility. So, you know, it's almost like Hebrews 12, where it says about Jesus, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. And so later on, when we start talking about humility and humbling ourselves, realize that this is real. And the end result of when we talk about learning about humbling ourselves, the end result of is this. It's the fulfillment of this. So anyway,
once you get it, exalting is the end result. Don't you need to have grace to operate in that exalting, or is that like a new spouse?
oh yeah.
They bring on a whole new side of
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, that's good. That means like you're exalted and the spout doesn't go away.
What is the Proverbs passage we kept quoting last week? God gives riches and he adds no sorrow to it. I mean, that is the goodness of God. So when God exalts, God puts you in destiny, God blesses, he don't put sorrow to it. So anyway, last week we talked about the traps of exaltation. Remember, we talked about when an exaltation is delayed, how we can be tempted to take it into our own hands. There could be obstacles that can bring discouragement and affect our faith. Then we can temptation to prematurely exalt ourselves. When that happens, we miss God's best. Then we were talking about exaltation by men and not God. And then we were talking about self-exaltation. So that's sort of what we're talking about. So anyway, this week, we're going to talk about this deal. Are y'all in 1 Peter 5 still? Okay, read it again, 5 and 6, and let's watch this.
Likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes. All of you be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time.
Okay. Well, yours says, New King James says, that ain't working. Alex, throw this away. Due time. New American Standard says proper time. Well, guess what? The combination of those two words is
Kairos?
kairos.
Of course it is.
Kairos. So at the kairos moment, God exalts. Now, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Kairos moments. And this sort of gets back into what Mason was talking about a few minutes ago, about needing grace to function there. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. You need grace to step into it. You need mercy and grace to step into it, and you're going to need mercy and grace to stay there. Now, go back. Let's think about Hebrews 4:16. In fact, let us draw, this we talked about Sunday, so Sean and Mason and whoever's online, people online, Hebrews 4:16 is very crucial. Let us draw near with confidence to what? The throne of grace, that you might receive mercy, find grace. And it says, he uses this phrase, time of need. Well, it's kind of interesting. When I looked up that word, I'm thinking time of need. It's got to do with some kind of crisis moment or in a place of need. But the word is, guess what? Evkairos. It's a compound word. This means good kairos. Good kairos. So when you read Hebrews 4:16, you're thinking about you're in trouble. You're needing kairos. Needing grace and mercy. No. This thing in Hebrews 4:16, which I didn't really realize the fullness of it is, it's got to do with stepping into these destinies that God's got for us, or receiving grace, finding the grace to be exalted. That's where it's at. So anyway, it's got to do with kairos moments. It's got to do with time. Now, that's what I want to talk about tonight, because if you'll go with me to Acts chapter 7, there's something that anytime we're talking about this, we need to all right. I said Acts chapter 7. Tell you what, let's go to Acts chapter 17 first. Then we'll come back to Acts chapter 7. All right. 17:24 through 26. Sean, read it, will you?
The God who made the world and all things in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, neither is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all life and breath and all things. And he made from one every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation.
All right. This God who made everyone from one man, Adam, every nation, and get this, it's kind of crazy to think about, having determined their kairos moments. Not this, y'all. This is what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Not this. This deals with measurable time. Measurable, or it is also deals with this. This deals with like seconds, minutes, hours. This deals with like if was somebody, says you have a destiny to live 80 years on the earth, that would be chronos. But kairos, where God is created, is that, say, in the path of your life, what God has purposed is God has, say this red marker, God has purposed there to be kairos moments in your life. These kairos moments set the destiny of your lives in motion. This is where the grace is at in our lives. And that's when it says, come to with confidence to the throne of grace that you might receive mercy, find grace and help in, find grace, mercy in time of need. It's finding these. That's where it's at. That's what we're talking about tonight. Where the grace is, that's where the exaltation is. And so God purposed it. So one thing I want to really establish out here tonight is God has purposed these kairos moments for us. You're not just wandering around in life hoping you hit one. God has purposed kairos moments in your life. And we know that these kairos moments and these plans that God has for us, according to Jeremiah 29:11, is plans to what? Prosper you, not to harm you, but to give you a future and a hope. One of my other favorite past scriptures is 1 Chronicles 12, where it says this, it says, it lies in God's hands to make great and strengthen everyone. Wow. These kairos moments are destiny moments to make great and strengthen everyone. So anyway, that's where we want to go tonight. We want to talk about kairos, but we got to talk about chronos also, and how these two work together. So, but God has purposed this. Now, here's one thing I want to say to you. This is where, think about the throne of grace, that you might receive what?
Mercy.
And here's the interesting thing. I've been wrestling with this. God, why do you receive mercy and you find grace? And that's where God was showing me that there's, like we're saying, there's these two facets of receiving and finding. But it's interesting to me, receive mercy. Receive mercy. What you're going to see tonight is that chronos, in relationship to these kairos moments, chronos is not always attached to this. Now, God can attach a chronos to a kairos, but I will say this, y'all. I don't know how many times, but I know in my life, excuse me, sorry about that, in relationship to chronos, in relationship to the fulfillment of kairos, in the appointed chronos, needs mercy. Because guess what?
We screw it up.
We're going to see that tonight. We're going to see that some of that stuff tonight. So that's why I just want to say that God has not been out of shape and stuff in relationship to our lives, in the process of time of our lives. Because you think about it, he's eternal. So what's a few years to him? I mean, what's 20 years to him? I mean, poor Abraham.
But at the same time, it would be like, like Moses, obviously he had
That's where we're going.
Right, yeah. But, 30 years, the Israelites have to spend more in slavery than they had to.
That's the bummer part.
Yeah.
That's the bummer part. But God still, so anyway, Q's bringing something here we're going to go to. So let's go to Acts chapter 7. And, all right. Now, y'all have heard me say this before last time. So Genesis chapter 15, verse 13. When Abraham's coming into the promised land, going to come to the promised land. God prophesies to Abraham that his people would be in Egypt. He prophesies this to Abraham in Genesis chapter 15. He prophesies to him that his people would be in Egypt for 400 years. So keep that chronos in mind. So anyway, but in reality, let's just get it out there. The children of Israel were in Egypt for 430 years. And this is what Q was alluding to. Well, not alluding to, speaking it. But let's watch this. Okay, so in Acts chapter 7, verse 17. Okay, let's start at 15. Sorry about that. So Jacob went down to Egypt, and there he and our father died. Fathers died. Okay, that's Stephen's preaching here to the Pharisees. And notice what? They were removed to Shechem and laid in the tomb which Abraham had purchased for a sum of money from the sons of Hamor in Shechem. That's a whole other prophetic thing. But watch verse 17. But as the time of the promise was approaching, which God had assured to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Egypt. Okay, the time of the promise. The time of this chronos promise was approaching. So anyway, so if we're marking time, let me remove this. So if we're marking time of history, so here's time. So there is a God has purposed for there to be, well, let's just go. Guess what Greek word here is in verse 17? Which one of these two would you say that is? But as the time of the promise was approaching. Chronos. So literally, I believe in this situation, what it's saying is, so here is God saying 400 years in bondage in Egypt is here, and really we know somewhere in here, this is chronos, is a happening. This is approaching. So what I really want to, and let's go on, and then we'll say it. Notice verse 18. Until there arose another king over Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph. It was he who took shrewd advantage of our race and mistreated our fathers so that they would expose their infants and they would not survive. It was at this time Moses was born. All right. That is kairos. So what we're seeing is, here comes a kairos. Here is definitely a kairos. Don't have a specific scripture that says this, but kairos, literally children of Israel coming out of Egypt and going into the promised land, is definitely a kairos moment. That is a history moving thing. So, but what we're seeing is when Moses was born, that was a kairos moment. All of a sudden, things are heading in a direction. A moment that sets history. Once Moses is born, guess what? Ain't no turning back. That's why Pharaoh, all of a sudden, guess what he's trying to do? What he did. And well, in fact, I'm getting ahead of myself. So what I want to really talk to us to look at tonight is that that how to navigate and deal with these two things. And so one of the things that I want to talk about in the let's go to Numbers chapter 27. Nah, it's okay. That's okay. We don't need to go there. That's a whole nother thing. That's where I was going to show you where how this worked in relationship to Joshua. Joshua was exalted into the leader that the children of Israel reckoned. Well, let's look at it real quick. Joshua 4:14. This is the real. We're not going to focus on Joshua, but it's just a cool example. And I could show you some other. Well, we'll look at it and show you what I'm talking about. 4:14. Watch this. What is that? Yeah, y'all hear that? Is that thunder?
Downstairs?
Okay. Joshua 4:14. All right. Moses has died, and on verse 14, somebody read it.
On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, so that they revered him just as they had revered Moses all the days of his life.
So he's exalted, and he's put in a place, exalted into that leadership position. And also what happened is when he's exalted, the favor of the Lord is on him, and it affects how he's leading. Now, what I want you to look at is in relationship to that exaltation, go to Numbers chapter 27. Numbers 27 and verse 18. Oops, let me get there. Computer don't want to cooperate. Now watch this. Moses is alive. Now watch this season. Watch this thing that's going on. The Lord said to Moses, take Joshua the son of Nun, a man with whom the Spirit, in whom is the Spirit. Lay your hands on him, stand before Eleazar the priest, before all the congregation, commission him in their sight. You shall put some of your authority on him in order that all the congregation of the sons of Israel may obey him. 21. He shall stand before Eleazar, whom shall inquire for him by the judgment of the Urim and Thummim and such and such. At his command they shall go out, at his command they shall come in. He and the sons of Israel with him, even all the congregation. 22. Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua, set him before Eleazar, the priest, before all the congregation. Then he laid hands on him and commissioned him. Now, note, it's important here. Moses does this, but guess what? He's not exalted yet. He's not exalted yet. It's preparation. It's a journey, and it's really cool. It's really, you watch the process of Joshua to Joshua's life in the book of Numbers, then over into the book of Joshua in chapter 4, when he is exalted, God exalts him. His attitude was an attitude of humility, especially in relationship to Moses and God. I mean, Joshua was a man of humility, and it was very easy to see how God exalted him. God gave him grace. And so anyway, that was just, I wanted to see y'all see that sort of that combination there. But when we start talking about kairos moments in relationship to exaltation, go to Exodus chapter 23. Now, this is kind of interesting. When God exalts us, we have kairos moments of exaltation. This one's really interesting to me. Exodus 23, 29, and 30. Remember the Proverbs, it says, an inheritance quickly gained will not be what? Blessed in the end. Now, what's this thing about exaltation and kairos moments? Exodus 23, 29, and 30. Can you read it, please?
I will not drive them out before you in a single year, that the land may not become desolate and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. I will drive them out before you little by little until you become fruitful and take possession of the land.
Now, what we're looking at is kairos moments. When we're coming into kairos moments, what literally is sometimes those kairos moments come in levels. And God will not like bring you into the totality of the fullness of that kairos all at one time. If you're not aware of that, you can think you're missing it. I mean, I thought you was gonna bless me in business. Well, but here I'm making, just a little bit. When God's going, a little bit. Or God, I thought you was gonna give me a profitable ministry, and I'll be honest with you. I forget one time, one of my thoughts was, I got into, I went to East Stone Gap the first time, and ministry was just so hot. I mean, crazy hot. And then I remember it got so hot, we were casting out so many demons that I literally asked the Lord to stop it. Because there was so much happening, so many people getting saved, that we didn't have the capacity to handle it. And just think about that statement. It says, I will drive them out little by little. And it says, because the wild beasts become too numerous for you. I mean, in other words, for this situation I'm telling you about, there's too many demons to cast out. I'm going, I mean, seriously, y'all, I'm getting called all kind of cousins. During that time, I had people stopping me on the street, asking me to lead them to Jesus. People knocking on my door, coming to my door, who I did not know, asking me to lead them to Jesus. I mean, crazy stuff like that, So, I mean, but when God starts exalting, sometimes these kairos moments will be in levels, little by little. And don't let that be a point of discouragement for us, is in it. In fact, I do want to quote this too. This is in relationship to kairos moments. You remember when God, after the flood, He's made this statement about how to operate. He says, be fruitful and what? Multiply. One thing that I've learned to be true, and I wish I'd have known it earlier in my life, you do not want to multiply until you find out how to become fruitful. And what I've been guilty of in the past, I become a little bit fruitful, and kairos starts to manifest a little bit, and I go, oh man, we're fruitful. Let's multiply. And so we started multiplying this little bitty fruitfulness, and it was premature. And so that's why one of the things that really God has pressed into me in relationship to what we're doing here. If God is birthing something here in relationship to a church, my heart is, I know that if it does, it will multiply. It will be sending people out. But the thing that I really want to know is, okay, God, how do everybody know how to be what? Fruitful. So anyway, that's a little rabbit, but sometimes realize kairos moments will come in points of time as little by little. All right, let's go to another thing I want to speak about kairos moments. Go to Acts chapter, back to Acts chapter 7. Are you on Acts chapter? No, go back to Acts chapter 7. This is where we were at. Now, we're going to read this, and you're going to go, how do you know this? Well, let me just say this. Verse 20, 19. It was he, that Pharaoh, who took shrewd advantage of our race, mistreated our fathers, so that he would expose our infants, and they would not survive. It was at this Kairos that Moses was born, and he was lovely in the sight of God, and he was nurtured 3 months in his father's house. Now, the thing I'm trying to say in this, and it's hard to see it in this past scripture, but what I want to also say to you is, let's imagine this is a road, and what I have discovered with God, there are Kairos moments, miniature Kairos moments alongside the path, the road that you're on, that are good indicators that you're on the right path. Let me give you an example. In 1991, I came up to Virginia Tech. I was standing on the chapel of Virginia Tech and praying and seeking the Lord. And God says to me, just says this: the fields are white unto harvest. Okay, we were living at East Stone Gap at the time. I go home, I say, babe, let's pack up, we're moving to Blacksburg. Okay? All right, well, that was a Kairos moment. That set direction in our life. So we moved to Blacksburg. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, we're going to move to Blacksburg. Well, I go to Blacksburg to find a house. I'm sleeping on the couch of a friend of mine who lived in Blacksburg. He was a master student at Tech. His name's Tech Wawa. You remember Tech? Did you ever meet Tech? Tech. I'm sleeping on his couch. Guy I'd led to the Lord, and he was from Malaysia. But so anyway, I'm sleeping on his couch. All of a sudden, the Lord appears to me in a dream and says, "Don't live in Blacksburg. Live in Radford. Don't start campus ministry at Virginia Tech yet. Started at Radford University." Wow, that's wild. That was a Kairos moment. If I had not had that vision, dream, and we moved to Radford, that's where Eagles Nest Ministry started. I wouldn't have met Ted Farmer. I wouldn't have met Allison Laster. I wouldn't have met, Tulia O'Reilly, Catherine Worley. I could, just scores of people I could just rattle off. And a lot of people's lives would have been a whole lot different if those moments, those Kairos moments, God said, go to this. Okay, those were like signs on the road. So anyway, here's one of the most precious ones to me. Well, those were big, but I'll never forget. So we moved to Radford. We buy this house, which temporarily we're in the process of buying this house. I go to meet, I'll never forget this, go to meet with the dean of students at Radford University about how to start a campus ministry at Radford. I'm walking up the steps of Heath Hall, which is the student center at that time. I think it was student center. Yeah, it was called, student center. Or do you wouldn't even know?
I wouldn't.
Yeah, it's a student center of Radford University, center of a lot of what goes on. I'm walking up the steps, and walking down the steps of this pastor from who was a very, I listened to tapes on many times, a guy named Peter Lord. He was from Titusville, Florida, and he was doing a small Bible conference at Radford University. And I see him walking down the steps, and I'm going, what? It'd be like Mason walking down the steps, and all of a sudden he sees Michael W. Smith at Blacksburg. Randomly. I'm just randomly. And Peter's walking down the steps, and I go, and I see him, and I stop him And I introduced myself to him and I go, what are you doing here? You know, and he says, I'm such and such. And anyway, ended up having lunch with him and he speaks stuff into me and stuff. But guess what? For me, that was a Kairos sign that I was on the right path. It wasn't the fulfillment of it, but it was one of those signposts. It's how I always pictured is, you know what it's like driving through a big city when you're changing lanes left and right, you know, and after you change all the lanes, you're going, all right, am I on the right road? And you're looking for one of those the signs on the road that goes, it tells you what interstate you're on or what road you're on. And you take a sigh of relief when you look, okay, I'm on the right road. That's what these things will be. So in Kairos moments, sometimes it'll be little by little. Sometimes there's Kairos moments that are signposts you're on the right path. So anyway, yeah, sort of like here Sean and I and Philip Bailey and our wives own a house and we're trying to sell it. Mason and Nell come somehow catch view of our house. She starts praying. I guess you started claiming it, didn't you?
Yeah, it's just like,
Huh?
yeah.
We couldn't sell the house. I mean, we got people having houses all around us and all this. We can't sell the house because Nell has claimed this house. And when they finally decide they want the house, and so we agreed to sell to them. Then guess what? Then all these offers come out of the woodwork, you know. So it was her fault. That was a Kairos.
You know that, Sean?
Yeah, you knew that, didn't you? Yeah.
Everything else was settling in a week.
Yeah. I mean, we got the thing set on the market, you know, and it's just sitting there. You know, people are coming and looking at it and going, 2 or 3 people going, yeah, oh yeah, we want it. I think 2 of them, yeah, we want it. We don't hear anything
No.
from them.
Crickets.
Sorry, guys.
That was funny. Anyway, sorry about that. So anyway, so what I want to speak, just us to get into a few minutes, is this thing. A season of Kairos. It's the chronos of the Kairos. It's the time. It's getting close. Okay? And there's some things that I just want us to pick up. So now, y'all are in Acts 7? This one is really, really good about it. Now look at verse 19. Okay, 17. As the time of the promise was approaching, God assured Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Egypt. There arose another king who did know nothing about Joseph. He took shrewd advantage of our race, mistreated our fathers, and exposed their infants. In the season, what is that? What did Pharaoh do? He started mistreating. In the season, it is not unusual for there to be massive opposition.
At the start?
Yeah, before
Throughout the whole
before
thing.
before the Kairos hits. I cannot tell you how many times, there's a number of times, it's a bunch, it's more than once, and it's more than twice, that I'm flying overseas to go do big ministry times overseas, be going overseas. About a week before I go, all of a sudden I get sick. And there's 2 or 3 times that I am sick on the plane flying over, that I'm going to have to fly where you literally what you're flying for like 24 hours, you land over in Serbia, and you go, and then you've been traveling for over 24 hours, and then you get over there and you land at 4 o'clock and you start teaching at 7 o'clock for 2 hours, and so there's this opposition that will hit you. I'll never forget this one. Sean, you remember this one? I'm in the airport, getting ready to get on a plane to go overseas and minister. All of a sudden, Mike Schluter, friend of ours, who this way before Sean and then Molly were even thinking about property, but their driveway, where their driveway is right now, it's snow on the ground. It was winter. It was in February. All of a sudden, Mike Schluter calls me and says, "Rick, there's a dead woman in a car
In the driveway.
in the driveway." Yeah. And here I am getting ready to get on a plane. We had a mobile home right here. Paula's right here. She's living on the property. And I'm going, what do I do? I mean,
What did you do?
well,
Did you call Paula and say, hey, you gotta go take?
cops come.
Cops
Come. Mitch came out and stood with her, and was with her and stuff like that. And so I get on a plane. Another time I'm getting ready to go overseas. I don't know if you remember this one. Sean helped me a lot with this one. All of a sudden, like 2 days before I'm supposed to go, this when we just started Kairos, the 2 of the main employees we had, we're going to go do other things. One's going to go out of town, the other one's going to do another thing. And here I'm getting ready to get on a plane, and there's nobody to operate Kairos. I mean, opposition in the season. So don't let it surprise you. And so look at that. I mean, so the time he took shrewd advantage of our race, mistreated our fathers so that they would expose. Now get this, y'all. Watch this. It was he who took shrewd advantage of our race, mistreated our fathers so that they would expose their infants and they would not survive. What is that? Abortion of Kairos. Notice that. Pharaoh's putting pressure on the Hebrews that they would expose their infants. Who is supposed to be born?
Moses.
Moses.
Did you know that, or was it just coincidence?
It was Satan.
Says it.
Well, yeah.
Says it. That's verse 19. Verse 20 says, it was at this Kairos that Moses is born. There'll be a temptation in the season of opposition and a temptation of abortion of the Kairos. So I'm going through this so we'll understand what's going on.
But doesn't the opposition, doesn't that get, I feel like you couldn't have the second one without the opposition.
Yeah, these two are connected.
Yeah.
What if God is the opposition?
Do what?
What if, how do you know who's the opposer?
Well, it's when God tells you something.
If you're not hearing right.
And that's Satan. But he'll try to tell you, oh, you didn't hear right. No, when you know you heard, God said, I'm supposed to go overseas.
I just heard stories of people that committed to something and then they felt they shouldn't go, and then it was a disaster. And if they went, it would have been a disaster.
Well, those are a whole nother rabbits. I'm talking about when God makes a promise. You know it's God's promise. I mean, we know God promised Abraham 400 years. Children of Israel are going to be in Egypt. They're coming out. Because you can imagine, y'all, children of Israel, they're in there. They know when they went in. So they know what Abraham was prophesied to Abraham. So guess what? 400 years. So anyway. So now let's look at, we're in Acts chapter 7. Let's look at verse 20 and 20 through 22 and watch this. Somebody read that for me.
What is it again?
20 through 23.
Yeah.
7. At this time Moses was born and was well pleasing to God. He was brought up in his father's house for 3 months. But when he was set out, Pharaoh's daughter took him away and brought him up as her own son. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds.
Okay. Well, what is that descriptions in there in 20 through 22? Literally what you're seeing there is a season of preparation and resources for success. I mean, you think about it. Moses' school and all of the learning of the Egyptians is a man mighty in power and words and deeds. Now, here's the important thing about this, y'all. Is it what takes more faith? For a lowly man to humble himself, or a rich man to humble himself?
Rich.
Takes more faith. The lowly man's already,
He doesn't have anything to lose.
you don't have anything to lose.
Sometimes it's a mindset.
Huh?
It's a mindset sometimes.
Sometimes. But what I'm trying to say is, it's going to sound, make sure you hear this right, what I'm about to say. There's more blessing on an exalted man to humble himself in the sight of the Lord than there is for a man who's been defeated to humble himself. Because he's already there. That other guy, to consciously go to humble himself in the sight of the Lord, humble himself in relationship to other people, humble himself under the mighty hand of God, is a thing of faith. So you think about that in relationship to our lives as we go through this. So, but what we're talking about here, Moses is getting set up for an opportunity of blessing. He's going up. And at this place here is an opportunity for him to humble himself, but he gets a little help of humbling. So, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But in the season it's a season of preparation. And here I want to say, don't let the season of prep frustrate you. I mean, I remember this, when in 1986, God says, go to ministry full time. But go in ministry full time, go to seminary, move to Fort Worth, Texas, and go to seminary. Well, I have to confess, I was in seminary for three and a half years. Took a year out to go do an internship here at Virginia Tech. So in school, 2.5 years. Other than that year, 9 months that I was at Virginia Tech, I won't be honest with you, that was the driest, most unfruitful time in my life.
The year here?
Huh?
The year at Tech?
No.
All of it.
The 2.5 years that I was taking classes at Virginia Tech, I'm not at taking
Seminary.
In seminary in Fort Worth, Texas. It was a time of preparation. I was in the season of Kairos. Because as soon as I came out and I came into East Stone Gap Baptist Church, it was no hold bars. It was wide open. Last weekend, Paul and I had one of the precious people from that. In fact, it was the chairman of the pastor search committee that hired me. That he and his wife came to visit Paul and I last weekend. I mean, became precious friends. But in that was miracle upon miracle that happened as soon as we got there. And as soon as it started, but that 2.5 years in seminary was a season of prep. So in the chronos, in the season of a kairos, expect preparation. Don't let it frustrate you. Now watch this in 7:23. This is okay, 23 and 24. I'm gonna read this. Watch this. But when he was approaching the age of 40, it entered his mind to visit his brethren, the sons of Israel. So in the time frame of this, this is 400 years right here. Okay? In year 390, guess what? It enters his mind, literally his heart, to visit his brethren, the sons of Israel. 24. When he saw one of them being treated unjustly, he defended him, took vengeance for the oppressed, striking down the Egyptian. 25 tells you what entered his heart. He supposed that his brethren understood that God was granting them deliverance through him. So at age 40, year 390, the vision to be the deliverer of Israel manifested in his heart. Now, what can happen? I'm going to put it this way. I don't know if this is the correct way to write it. Of kairos can be manifested. Now, sometimes, y'all, you know the kairos ahead of time. Like for us, for Paul and I, when we were talking about, I was talking about when we went to started Eagle's Nest. Wow. But here, it's crazy how, think about this works, okay? So think about this. Before year 390, do you think Moses thought about delivering the Hebrews? Nope. Had zero thoughts about that he was going to be the deliverer of Israel. Zero. But at year 390, age 40, it entered his heart, he's the deliverer of Israel. So before then, if you'd asked Moses, what's your destiny? Oh, I want to be Pharaoh's man. I may even be Pharaoh one day. No? Oh, that'll be big. Because he's man of mighty word and deed. And I was thinking about this, in my life, there's these kairos moments that I am clueless of what's ahead. I'm clueless. I know a gist of where God's taking me, but I don't know the substance of where God's taking me. So don't be discouraged if you don't have clear vision in the season of the kairos. God is faithful to bring it clarity at the proper time. It's his show. It is his show. I could tell you, I think I told you about East Stone. Here, Paul and I graduate. I graduate from seminary in May, 1st of May. And here I'm married, 2 kids, and the question is, what are you going to do? I have zero idea. I've got these offers, but every time I would step toward an offer, it was just like God stopped it. I'm praying. One night I spent the night at the church, and and tried to pray through the night, just seeking the Lord about what to do. I get one word, wait. That's not what I want, God. Just wait. So anyway, Paul and I graduate. So we come to Big Stone Gap and stayed with my cousin Earl for just, it was a safe place. I knew I was supposed to do a revival up in West Virginia in June, but I don't know what I'm doing. And so I'm thinking, well, we're going to go back to Texas. I'm going to work on PhD, and that sounds good. I'll work on my PhD and work at the church that we're going to. And the church we was going to was a really good church. That's where I learned spiritual warfare. Really cool. But it was that time I'm up in West Virginia, where the very next day we're supposed to head back to Texas, that all of a sudden Paula gets a phone call from the guy that visited us last week, says, I hear your husband is maybe interested in a pastor in a church. And Paula, he says, can I talk to him? So he calls me in West Virginia and asks me if I'd be interested. And because I don't have anything, I go, well, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm not really interested because it's a traditional Baptist church. But and he says, will you talk to us and will you preach for us on Sunday at Gate City Baptist Church? And I go, well, yeah, I'll preach. Opportunity to teach Jesus. So anyway, make a long story short, after that meeting, I preached, then I met with all the leaders, the main leaders from that church. And I shared vision with them about casting out demons and baptism of the Holy Spirit and all kind of crazy stuff, trying to talk them out of, and this is so crazy to me. I am specifically talking about baptism of the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues, casting out demons. And so much, and I'm being so negative about coming. One of the ladies who became a real good friend of us looks at me and says, Rick, are you trying to talk us out of asking you to come? And I go, yes, you don't know what you're asking. And I literally said those words. You could ask Paula. And she goes, really? And then the one that blew me out of the water, Roger, this guy, I wish I could have met him last weekend. Sweet guy, classy guy. He was a civil engineer, but very classy guy. And here I'm talking about baptism, speaking in tongues, and all kind of crazy stuff. And about 2 or 3 months after I went to East Stone Gap, and people were getting baptized in the Holy Spirit, and I'm teaching on baptism of the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues, because they needed to know what was happening. They didn't even know what was happening. And Roger comes up to me one Sunday night and he goes, Rick, why didn't you tell us that you spoke in tongues? That's what I said. Roger, how can you say that? How can you say that? And I honestly believe God did this. They heard what they needed to hear. It was just so amazing to me. And but that's what I'm trying to say is, y'all. God cornered me into that Kairos moment at that church. And it set a lot of things in motion in my life. So anyway, so in that season, go to, this is going to be a little deviation. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3. Two and 3. Well, I'll tell you what, before we go to 2 and 3, how do you spell Deuteronomy? Here it is. I got to figure out a way to get this thing better. Go with me. The whole chapter is about one subject, about wildernesses. In fact, that's one of the things that I want to say is this season is most of the time is a wilderness. And what is a place of a wilderness? It's a place of no props. Children of Israel, verse 2 says, verse 1, the last phrase, go in and possess the land which God swore to your forefathers. But then notice what it says in verse 2. You'll remember all the way the Lord God led you in the wilderness these 40 years. So, guess what? It's about the promised land. And notice the exaltation. Look at 17 and 8. 17 and 18. Can you read 18, 17 and 18, please? Oh, 16 through 18.
In the wilderness he fed you manna which your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and that he might test you to do good for you in the end. Otherwise you may say in your heart, my power and strength of my hand made me this wealth. But you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who is giving you the power to make wealth, that he may confirm his covenant which he swore to your fathers, as it is this day.
That's Kairos moments. That you receive the power to what? Make wealth. Not he doesn't give you the wealth. He gives you the power to make wealth. So in that place, in that wilderness, going back to verse 2, notice what it says. Can you read that, please?
You shall remember all the way which the Lord your God has led you in the wilderness these 40 years, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not.
Notice that last phrase. To know what is in your heart, whether you keep his commandments or not. Does God need to know what's in our hearts?
No.
No. He knows. Who needs to know?
We do.
Yeah. We do. It's in that place, in the place of the season, in the wilderness of preparation, that our hearts, the program of our hearts are revealed. Why is the programming of our hearts to be revealed? Notice verse 3. Read 3, Q.
He humbled you and let you be hungry and fed you with manna which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you understand that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by everything that proceeds out of the mouth of the Lord.
What does that mean? He fed you with manna which you did not know. You don't know it. You've never seen it before. You don't know what it tastes like. What is that called? Living in the unseen. What is that called? Huh? Faith. In this season, in the season of Kairos, in the season of exaltation, you learn to live by faith. So that when the exaltation comes, it doesn't blow you out of the water. You read that earlier. That when he brings you into the land, you don't say, oh, my power and my strength have made me this wealth. No, you know you got there by living by faith. So, the season of exaltation, these are some of the characteristics that can manifest in these things. Things can happen in there. I'm sitting here thinking about this in my mind. I'm just being honest with you. I go, Paul and I need to sit down, and we need to sit down with a tape recorder, and we need to start recording this stuff. Because in the seasons of chronoses and kairoses of our lives, all of this stuff is manifested. And I have to confess, y'all, I'm going to tell you this. I love Kairos moments of grace. It is so awesome. And the temptation is that you want to get there really quick. You know? Like Moses did. He hit 390. He says, hey, here's some Hebrews getting beat up on. Let me do it. So guess what? He's going to wipe out the Egyptian army, one Egyptian at a time. But that ain't gonna work. It's not gonna work. So anyway, is there anybody online got any questions or thoughts, or is Paul on? So the season of Chronos, the time the Kairos is approaching. Oh, I want to repeat what I spoke earlier. So there's a 30-year gap. You spit this, Q. Let's draw near with the throne of grace that we might receive mercy. There's 30 years of mercy, y'all. 30 years of mercy.
I had a question for you.
I hear
Scott.
Scott, you got something?
No, it's me, Dan.
Oh, that's Daniel.
Daniel Watson?
Carl.
Hello. Hey, Dan.
Which realm, I mean, is like the heavenly realms, do they exist in Chronos, Kairos, or is there a third time level thing? Or I don't know. Like say, when we move on to the next stage, what time do they exist in?
I'm sorry, I had a hard time understanding it, Dan.
This is my, I'm speaking into my computer. It's not a good microphone. So, when in the next stage, the heavenly realms, spiritual realm, do they also exist in Chronos and Kairos, or is there a different type of time that they exist in?
No, well, that is a really great question, because I know God is eternal, but as God expresses himself into this realm, it goes into Kairos. I don't know if you were online earlier when we were talking about in Acts chapter 17, verse 25, where it talks about how God created everything, that he created everyone every nation from one man, and it says, having determined their Kairos and their appointed boundaries. So when God starts to express himself in our realm, it comes into Kairos and Chronos. And so much that it's even, look at Ephesians chapter 1, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 9 and 10, listen to this. It says, he made known to us the mystery of his will, according to his kind intention, which he purposed in him, in Jesus, with a view to an administration suitable to the fullness of the times, Kairos. That is the summing up of all things in Christ, in the heavens and on the earth. So the spiritual realm, when it comes and interacts with mankind, it deals with Kairos and Chronos also. Does that make sense, Dan?
Yeah, makes sense. I watched too many sci-fi movies, I think, with how they travel in different Chronos times and those kind of things, and like black holes and bending time. I just didn't know if there was something beyond the Chronos, or if it was just or if that's the way that time is ordered then as we know it.
Well, I would say there is a whole lot more that how I'm describing this than what we're speaking at one level. I do know in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, where it talks about there's an appointed time for every event, You remember later on it says, that which is has already been, for God seeks that which has passed by. You know, and you're going, okay, God, you're seeking something that's already passed by. Well, so yeah, you're on something, man. God's got his own little spiritual black holes that he comes in and out of. So, which I'll be honest with you, I know just enough about that. That's crazy.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Rick.
Do what?
I said thank you.
Yeah, you're causing some problems, bro. Because I could chase that rabbit. It's a good one, though. You're on the right rabbit. You're right. You're on the right trail with that. Thinking about that. So, anybody else got any thoughts or questions?
When you experience a Kairos moment, is it timeless?
Timeless.
In that instant, like it feels like time stopped. Like you feel like you're in eternity. Like you have a perspective of God versus a perspective of soul.
Well, it depends on what the Kairos moment is. Like, for example, I mean, I think when you met with Dan and all of a sudden, and you had an interaction with me at a men's conference a year ago, and all of a sudden, somehow in the interactions, there was a suggestion about the possibility of you coming to Virginia. That was a Kairos moment.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on what you're talking about, or Kairos moments. I mean,
I guess revelation from God's understanding, would that be Kairos moment?
well, when the thoughts came to your mind about coming up here, what did you feel? What did you sense?
That was different. Ever since I got here, I've been experiencing like these point action events of revelation where kind of like what Dan was talking about is like timeless.
That's when he's visiting into your heart and doing works in your life. Yeah.
So there's different type, would that be considered a Kairos?
I would say. Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about thinking about the ways that I know that Kairos is used in the verses.
Hey, Rick, this is Scott. I have a question.
Yeah. Hey, brother.
So, by the way, I want to say thank you. This has been fascinating, really helpful. And I was curious on your word studies and this whole Kairos relationship to chronology and these moments of destiny opportunities and how they work together. Are there other sources out there that speak to this? Is it something that you speak to primarily? Are there resources for further research, or is this revelation that's germane to kind of your experience and how you've come to interpret and you're sharing?
I have to confess that for a long time, I just thought basically, Kairos and Chronos, Chronos was doing incremental time and Kairos dealt with like point action time. But then a brother preached at Dwelling Place one time, and you remember it? And he spoke this thing about memorable moments, and he spoke all these past scriptures, and all of a sudden, this whole thing exploded in me. So, no, it's not. I heard it from another brother, but then when it hit me, that it exploded. In fact, that's how the business that we started up there, that wilderness retreat resort that we bought, we called it Kairos, Memorable Moments. And that was in that same time. So yeah, it's not, yeah, it's God, I wish I could claim it, but, but a lot of what I'm teaching on now is stuff that God's just been showing me about it. And so, yeah, and but I don't know any other resources, Scott. Sorry to say that.
So no one's actually written on this in terms of, or have you written on this? I guess probably in some of your books, you've got reflections on it, but I just didn't know if there was, I mean, it'd be a great book to write.
Yeah, it would, wouldn't it? Why don't you write it?
I just had a Kairos moment.
It could be a Kairos moment. You never know.
See, bro. Are you going to get a Kairos moment with his wife? This guy's going to he's going to get Kairos. Yeah, no, Scott, it would be a good book. I'll be honest with you, I'm finding out that I don't know what, I'm finding out that I know what that I don't know. How about that? Is that a better way to say it?
But by the way, I love your story with your experience with the Baptist church. That's good stuff. Yeah.
Thanks, brother. Well, I will say this, it wouldn't be for my wife, Paula. She knew all along that we were going to go there, but I was she heard the Lord, but I didn't. So I'm fighting it all along. So praise God for wives that, that knew the voice of God. So thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Has anybody else got any questions or thoughts to add in this? We'll talk a little bit more about the residue effects of this next week. So there is a lot to say about Kairos and grace. In fact, Sunday morning here when we met, we spent a long time talking about Kairos moments, finding grace in these Kairos moments. So, but anyway, well, let's close shop and Q-Man, why don't you pray us, bro?
Father God, we just come before you, Lord. We thank you, Lord, for tonight, God. We thank you, Lord, for Lord, the revelation. Father God, Lord, I pray, Lord, right now, Lord, I can go in this, Lord, search it out, Lord, let me, Lord, seek, Lord, deep, God, Lord, into our hearts, God, Lord, this Lord, grace, God, Lord, humility, God, Lord, Kairos, Chronos, God, Lord, everything, the Lord, that you're just, Lord, imparting into us. Father, as we just, Lord, we thank you for tonight. We thank you for this each other, Lord, teaching, God, Lord, in fellowship. And we just bless you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Hey, Dan Carlisle, you still on? Is Dan Carlisle still on?
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, I was just, as Q was praying, I couldn't help but think about you and some of the things that we were talking about in Chronos, and those significant Kairos moments for you, and how it was a Kairos moment for you to come to Virginia rather than go to med school the first time. And then how, things got added to you in that, like with Jesse and, but then also in how that you've really been in a season, you and Jesse, for what? When you've been in med school, in residency and fellowship, how literally a lot of this stuff has been going on in y'all's lives. And thing that we're believing is that y'all are on the precipice of something really big, Kairos. And I know that recently y'all been facing a lot of obstacles. And I just really, these two things here about opposition and abortion of Kairos or vision, not let it, just take note of that. As Q was praying, you were on my heart, you and Jesse, about that. And allow God to birth vision in this. Don't get in a hurry. So.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I know you're not. But I think there's good stuff headed y'all's way, big time. So,
Yeah, I appreciate that. I feel like we've been getting the hammer lately, so
yeah,
appreciate
you
that.
have. But you're winning it. You are winning it. So, all right, bro. Love y'all. Y'all be blessed.
Appreciate you.
All right. Can you cut us off there?